Alrighty, I didn't even bother with the costume change because I want to wrap it up as much as I can so I can get this online tonight, both of these. Right, part 3. This is part 3. Do not proceed to part 3 without watching part 1, where I'm dressed in a red sweatshirt, and part 2, which is clearly labeled part 2. Alright? Dingbats. Okay. Because there are some ding-dongs out there who would watch it out of sequence because they just want to be radical. Or something. Okay, let's get on with it. Dungeon of Terror. I talked about that. I don't think there's anything more I need to say except it was just bloody awesome. And that was the haunted house. But it wasn't just the Dungeon of Terror, okay? Because people talk about Dungeon of Terror like it was the Holy Grail haunted house. And yeah, it was pretty cool. But it wasn't just that. Let me tell you something. There was nowhere you could go in Universal Studios without something going on those nights. Now, I only went on the one night, but everywhere it was like Coney Island Sideshow or something had exploded, and all the freaks were everywhere in the street. You know, it was amazing. It was like you walk down and right in front of you is like the snake handler with the cobra woman with snakes on her. Over there is somebody with fire breathing, and over here is a sword swallow. Over there is, and next thing you know, there's someone doing something with nails into their body or into their head, and you're going, oh my God, it's just surreal. And then you're walking on Hollywood Boulevard and you see these guys that look like they came out of a gay leather bar with all their harnesses and their huge, big, muscular things like Folsom Street Fair or something, except these mutated freaks are going to torture someone to death in an arena because it's, and then you realize, oh my God, it's Thunderdome. All you need is Tina Turner in 9-inch stiletto heels with her hair like this, and you would have it. But you know, and Mel Gibson being mistaken for Captain Walker from, well, The Who's Tommy, I guess, because that's where they must have stolen that from. But no, you don't have any of that. It's Thunderdome. They have a Thunderdome going on in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard, and everything else is all around you, and it just, and then there's a woman getting up on a metal spike and spinning around with it coming through her body. I mean, all of this stuff is happening in the streets. And then there's Beetlejuice doing an act. And, oh, hello. Guess who showed up? I was hoping she'd show up before I was done with Fright Nights. Oh, little kitty Bob. Yes. Yes. Anyway, Beetlejuice is doing an act on the streets of New York City. Just doing some kind of meet and greet. And then he's singing some songs up on a stage there or doing... You know, it's a stuff everywhere. There's a show, some kind of show everywhere. And then all of a sudden you hear, I heard very familiar music from when I was a little boy that I loved. You know, from when I was like maybe 7, 8 years old. I hear this, Cherokee people. And it's like, oh, what is that? And it is. It's, you know, they had a #1 hit back in the early 70s, and Hungry, and a bunch of, it's Paul Revere and the Raiders wearing their old Revolutionary War type with, you know, all the sort of glam rock costumes they wore back in the early 70s, and there they are on this big stage, and they're giving a concert, and this is going on there, and you know, and then I see this amazing show over, and for those of you who are young, you know, you go over to where the E.T. ride is, right? And then you have all that Kid Zone stuff. No, back then you had the E.T. ride. If you went a little bit, you know, past the Animal House Theater, whatever it's called, the Animal Theater, and past E.T., you go a little bit further, is the House of Blues. Excuse me. Stupid. Oh. No. There I am. Punish myself for bad. Not the House of Blues. Ugh. The Hard Rock Cafe, okay? Not the huge Coliseum monstrosity with all the indoor theater, whatever the hell it is, that they have today. I'm talking a small restaurant, and just a restaurant of the Hard Rock Cafe, with an entrance on the parking lot, and then another entrance on the studio side. So you could actually go to the Hard Rock Cafe and have dinner without coming into the park. But you couldn't go out the back door into the park unless you had a ticket for the park. See, that's how they did it. So this was right there, like just a little bit past E.T. And the parking lot was on the other side of that. All of that stuff that you know about over there on that side, all of that Fievel's Playground, Barney, all of that did not exist. There was a beam, a big earthen beam like they have around theme parks, because that was an edge of it, and you didn't know it was on the other side of that, probably some kind of production and stuff, backstage stuff, but rising up on the top was the Bates family mansion and a little replica of the motel underneath set up. Now, I'm not sure if that replica of the motel was there year-round, because I didn't go to the park year-round. This is my first time in the park. The next time I went was the next Halloween Horror Nights. For years, that was the only time I was ever in Universal. But for all I knew, that was there all the time. I don't know if it was. They may have taken it down. But it was set up like that. And they had some bleachers there, because they were going to do a show. And a Beetlejuice show, supposedly. So, oh, cool. So you go and see the show, and what would happen is you're sitting there in front of the Bates Motel at night, and for some reason there's a graveyard in front of the Bates Motel. It wasn't in the movie. But then a police car comes around, and it's Jake and Elwood Blues. Jake and Elwood Blues. And they go up to check into the hotel with some floozies they picked up, and Norman Bates. And the actors who did Norman Bates had the whole Tony Perkins voice and mannerisms down like brilliant. Blues Brothers were okay. They were in the park usually. I understand they did shows in the park all the time. And I think, you know, I've seen them since then. When I did get to the park during other times of the year, later in the 90s, they were still doing shows. They might even still do shows today. I think they don't they still do shows today? I don't get in the park that often during the other times of the year, but they might still be around, the Blues Brothers thing. I think they are. But that's who introduced it. So Norman Bates then takes you to the graveyard after the Blues Brothers leave or whatever, and there Beetlejuice comes out of the ground, and he takes over the show. So it was very interesting that it would introduce it with these other characters, but they had to have a reason for it to be at the Bates Motel. I guess that's the whole reason for that. So then he has he brings Dracula, Frankenstein, and other creatures out of the ground, and they have like a whole show, which is in a way was, I suppose, the precursor of the rock and roll show, because eventually they're playing music with a band, and it was a rather cool show. And I saw it, and then later on, when I went on the E.T. ride, I saw it again from the queue area at the E.T., because you could kind of see up over the hill and see what was going on up there. Yes, I went on rides. It was my first time at Universal. After Dungeon of Terror once, I couldn't go back again without taking up the whole night. And so I went all over the park, seeing whatever I could and going on whatever ride I could. And I was afraid I wouldn't have much time to do anything, and then this was awesome. I asked one of the employees, I don't think they call them cast members at this park, unlike where I had worked myself, but I asked him, okay, what's the policy with the time change? When I suddenly realized what day it was. This Saturday night was the night that we fell back. And although this is no longer the policy today, on that day, in that time, in 1991, they said, we're going to stay open the extra hour. And I said, cool. Because, you know, they didn't say For the Win back yet, then in 1991. So I was psyched, I was excited, I was ready. And I was able to spend an extra hour, and I managed to see a lot of the shows and a lot of the stuff that was going on, and go on a couple more rides. And so I got on Confrontation and Back to the Future, and see the Ghostbusters show as well for the first time. I don't know if I saw Earthquake for the first time that time or later, but nevertheless, I enjoyed Universal Studios for the first time. Halloween Horror Nights, which was Fright Nights for the first time. The first house, Dungeon of Terror. All kinds of street. I mean, I don't know if I really got it through to you what the street was like, but there was some kind of show wherever you looked. at any time practically. It was everywhere. There was some kind of entertainment in the streets. I mean, throughout New York, throughout San Francisco, throughout... oh yes, and in somewhere around there, I think it was in New York, there were guys with chainsaws chasing guests. They didn't call themselves the Chainsaw Drill Team yet, but they were there with the chainsaws chasing the guests. So that has been there since day one. Rat Lady since day one. Okay? These are traditions that have been there since the beginning and continue. Not only that, they didn't. It wasn't a parade like they would do years later, you know, with floats, but there was a processional parade-like thing going on at different times during the night. I didn't really have time to see it. I may not have been in the right place at the right time, but I know about it. And they had flags with like names of characters on it, like Dracula, and even non-universal characters like Freddy or Jason, and people following them down the street, and characters going up in procession down the street, and chainsaw people. You know, I don't know if they were in formation as a drill team or not yet. I don't think so. But there were chainsaw people. There were people with axes and people with, as characters, Dracula, Frankenstein, and even non-universal characters. They had Reagan, Linda Blair, from The Exorcist, on a bed. The bed would be pushed down the street, and she would be jumping up and down on the bed like she was possessed. And they had all this sort of stuff going on in this processional parade sort of thing. And although I did not attend on Halloween, I know that on Halloween night they had a costume contest for the guests. Now the policy, no guests in costume, but they had a special costume contest. And I heard them talking about on the radio how you could enter it. Well, those people who did enter the contest might have regretted it if they wanted to attend the event and go in the houses and have more fun, because they sequestered those people for a while backstage and left them there for a few, I don't know how long, maybe a couple hours, when they could have been enjoying themselves until they finally had time for the contest. And if you want to know more about that, I recommend contacting Jeremy, aka JW Fearman, who you can find at Horror Night Nightmares and other sites, and ask him about it, because I think he was a little kid then, but I believe he participated in the costume contest, and he's the only person I know offhand, personally, who was a contestant in that contest. So he can tell you all you need to know about that from first-hand information. So, and as I understand it, you got sequestered for a long period of time, and I think he'd rather have been going back in a Dungeon of Terror again. Anyway. So that's all I can think of about the events of that night. But again, it was overwhelming how much stuff they had. They've never had that much entertainment again. They've never had that much stuff going on. Even the scare zones, they've never had something happening everywhere you looked. And that was the way it felt. It was like, oh my goodness. Because this was the first time. Party was the atmosphere. It was more like a Halloween party that just never stopped all around you. You know, there was always something going on. And that was the feeling you got about it. And that was Fright Nights in 1991. I get this feeling there was something else I had meant to say about it. I think I hit all the notes and hit all the points. If there was something I forgot, I'll add it on to the video I'll do sometime later this week for 1992 and 93, or whatever I decide to do with that. So, in that case, this is the end of the Fright Nights videos. And, oh, I just thought of something. That Beetlejuice show, if you want to see it, you can. There's another YouTube poster who calls himself John Boy Jr., and he taped the Beetlejuice show back in 1991 that I described. He taped it, and he's put it up on YouTube. I think it's 2 or 3 parts. And I looked at part of one, but I didn't look at the whole thing. But you can go and find that and see it for yourself. So even though you may not even have been born yet, or were too young to go to Halloween Horror Nights back in those days, or didn't have the opportunity, or didn't live in Florida, or whatever your case may be, if you weren't able to go to Fright Nights and see the show, the Graveyard Tours is what it was called, not Graveyard Review, that was something else. Graveyard Tours, then go look that up. Fright Nights, Graveyard Tours, it's on YouTube. Okay? So next time we'll talk about 92 and maybe 93 as well. Ciao.